This obviously is an experimental attempt to do a hybrid between in-person and online. And so we have, well, to give you some idea, we have roughly around the world about 500, just slightly over 500 Sevaka members. And at the village, we have slightly over 200 Sevaka members. So, and then at the village, obviously, we have some here in person and some watching from home and some doing other things. So, so we're trying to figure out how to effectively have a kind of a hybrid where we can have participation from multiple levels, and we're still working it out. So today is a prototype where we're going to be in person here in the temple for those of us who are, plus online, for an hour. Then we'll go home and then we'll join virtually. Krishna Das will explain that a little bit more in detail. So the purpose really this year, often we have at the Sevaka member meetings that we have in the past, have had in the past, we have a theme for the year where we try to draw ourselves together into one functioning unit. Well, the theme for this year is to draw ourselves together into one functioning unit, which we are not. And so we need to figure out ways to make that happen. You know, there's a beautiful image, the largest living life form, as I understand it, on the planet is an aspen forest. And so you might think of a half a square mile of an aspen forest. And you think, well, there are all these dozens and dozens of trees, and that's what the aspen forest is. That's not what the aspen forest is. There's one root system underneath, and all of the trees that you see, like spuds on a potato, are growing up from that one root system underneath. And so relating that to the Sevaka order, we've got clumps of these sprouts, these trees growing up, and we call them Seattle members and Palo Alto members and village members and the CC members and so on and so forth. But we're all connected. We're all connected. Of course, we don't have a physical connection, but we're connected by a root system of the masters and the energy of what defines Ananda. As Swamiji wrote in the guidelines, what defines us as Ananda members? And he wrote those guidelines 30 years ago, and it's defined. And even that was after 20 years of living the kind of life that we live together. So he just kind of following the old Vedic model of there was an oral tradition and then it was written down. There was a living tradition and then Swami wrote it down. And so that living tradition of what draws us together as dedicated, really having given our lives to master and to master's expression through Ananda, that's what the Sevaka order is. And then you can list from there, you can list the things that we do together. We're all Kriya Bonds. We all meditate daily. We all serve. We all try to come together in satsang, and etc. And Krishna Das has done kind of a compilation of what those things are. But in essence, that's what the guidelines for members that Swamiji wrote is meant to kind of detail for us. We all follow, to a certain extent, a kind of a vibration that draws us together. Okay, having said that, that underneath that vibration, underneath all of the individual people and the individual definitions that we have, is some sort of a invisible matrix of energy that unites us. And it's been much easier up until now to work more dynamically on those obvious things that unite us. So here at the village, we have work days. And people who come to those work days, we have Sunday services, we have service projects, we have lots and lots of things that unite us here. And it's easy for us to coordinate together. But when we coordinate together, it doesn't mean that the Sevakas who are in Seattle are coordinating with us, or Palo Alto, or Los Angeles. And so the only thing, we have all of these individual, one might say, clumps of trees, groupings of members, but that exchange from underneath that draws us all together is not as dynamic as it could be. And so what we're trying to do now, this year as the theme, is to work on how we can coordinate our energies better. Because we all know that when we cooperate, when we coordinate, when we have a group mindset and a group goal, that takes on a power that is much more powerful than the sum of all the individual parts. Ananda couldn't exist. Ananda would not exist if we had not been able to coordinate our energies together to make it exist. And so what we're now trying to do, because the various communities that we have and the lifestyle of Ananda and of Ananda Sevakas is now well established. But what we need to do in order to become more effective is we need to find ways by which we can coordinate our energies. Sevaka obviously comes from seva. A Sevaka is a person who serves. Seva for us is service of master, of master's ray, of what draws us all together. So we are all individually doing that, but the feeling is that the challenges lying ahead are quite likely to get more challenging than what we're facing right now. And if we can take maybe the lull before the storm, maybe the storm will never come. You know, there are hurricanes out there that are headed right toward the landfall where we are, and somehow at the last moment they veer off. But I think this is a little bit more like climate change than a hurricane. It's kind of unavoidable. There are issues that are going to be coming to us as a whole planet, and we're already in the midst of that. I don't want to use this time to dwell on that. What I want to do, though, is to talk mainly about if we can strengthen our connections and strengthen our coordination, and we need to find ways that we can actually bring that into reality. And that's partly why these breakout sessions are happening after this, is we want smaller groups to come up with ideas of how we can coordinate better. Krishna Das and Devi and I have been meeting kind of periodically, and we've come up with a few ideas, and Krishna Das will be talking about that. Krishna Das, as you may or may not know, I should introduce the whole theme of him. About, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, we asked if he would take on kind of the coordination of the Sevaka order. And so he's been doing that and will continue to do that. But what we're trying to do now is to find ways that we can work together and make it more dynamic. Maybe there are ways that we haven't thought of that we can coordinate economically with each other. Certainly there are ways where we can serve by prayers, by hosting, by whatever ideas come up. But I think that we need to tease out more reasons for coordination together. Because if we don't, at this time, begin to work on our coordination, when the pressure gets heavier, the tendency will be not to coordinate, but will be to kind of auger in and do what is in front of you. But certainly you've understood that concept. So the purpose of this year, and we would like each of us to take that on, is to begin to think of ourselves more as a worldwide group. Swami has used the image that the Sevaka order is like Master's army. So an army of 500 may not sound like a huge army, but when those soldiers are all putting out light, and especially if we can put out that light in a more coordinated manner, that is a very powerful source of light in a world that's dark. You know, if you're imagine being in a desert and needing to navigate in a direction, and you just don't have any way of knowing how to move, and some miles away you see one little flashlight, and all you need is that little pinpoint of light, and it begins to give you a direction to travel in. So Ananda around the world in the Sevaka order are those pinpoints of light that allow people to move, in this case, into more of a harmony. It isn't just with Master. Remember, Master is the emissary of God for this age. So what we represent are the pinpoints of light to try to help people, ourselves, of course, but offering other people a way to travel in the right direction in this age. How does each individual on the planet begin to move in a way that his will gets more aligned with the will of God? That's really what we're about. And of course we have for us specific practices of meditation and Kriya and all of the aspects of our path. But that's kind of the qualitative aspect of Master's mission. The quantitative aspect is to help uplift world consciousness. And I think that the Sevaka order, specifically being the army of light that has gathered at this time and space on the planet, I think that we have a role to play in helping lead the charge forward in more coordination with it. And as I say, the primary theme for this year is how to work more together, to coordinate more together, and to unite our efforts so that they have more power and more resonance than they could. You know, if we think of 500 people spread around and each of them is chanting, "Oh God, beautiful," it doesn't have much of an impact. Bring those 500 people into one room and one coordinated chorus and chanting, "Oh God, beautiful," together has a lot of impact. So, as I say, the theme for this year is to work together, coordinate together, and to magnetize our identity as members of the Sevaka order. And I want to just end with an image that came that I found very helpful. It came from the other day we were meeting and we asked Atman to end the meeting by offering a prayer for protection for Ananda. And something in his prayer drew an image, but this is the perfect place to describe that visual image. So a visualization. As you chant Om Guru, your consciousness forms a magnetic point of focus that draws the connection from the Guru. Anandamoy Ma, one time someone asked her, if somebody prays to you, do you receive that prayer? And she said, it's like this, that I can see a vast crowd of people, and if someone prays to me, it's as if someone shines a big spotlight, and my attention then goes to that person who's shining that spotlight. So think of Master. When we pray to him, we shine that spotlight to him, and he responds with his grace. So think now of standing in the center of this. This is the visualization that came to me. Standing right in the center under that cupola. And so you chant Om Guru, and the Master's grace comes down like a shaft of light to you. And then as you think of the protection of Om Guru, for we're now talking the village, but it can be all of Ananda, but think of the village, but think of the whole of the village being contained in this building. So that shaft of light comes down because you've chanted and concentrated on Om Guru. Now it spreads out, and then it goes up and forms a protective bubble, a protective aura around the whole of Ananda village in this case, since this is fire season, but it can also be around all of Ananda. It can be around all of the world. But that image of the light coming down, spreading out, and then going back up in a bubble to reunite with its source forms that protective bubble. Anyway, I share that because it's been a helpful image for me to use when I'm chanting Om Guru in the particular way of trying to create a bubble of protection around Ananda. Now, Devi's going to also add some thoughts, and then Krishnadas will add some.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us both here and online. We received a beautiful email this morning from our friend Sangeeta, who is Gorja and Gaurav's mother, who is living now in Pune. And in India, they're celebrating Guru Purnima today. And Guru Purnima represents the celebration of the Guru, not just a Guru, but all Gurus, of every practice, every religion. And it's celebrating the divine descent. It's celebrating that interaction between the soul that's moving towards God and the souls that have found God and are saying, come, let me show you the way. And in one of my favorite lines in the Bhagavad Gita is, when virtue declines and vice is on the ascendant, I will come again and again. Taking visible form, I come to destroy evil and reestablish virtue. And they come again. Master in our line of gurus have come again.
Adjust the mic.
Okay. Thank you, Sakar. And so that's the descent of the masters. And then that magic happens. I remember years ago when I had the blessing of working in the garden under our great master gardener, Hanel Cassidy. He said something that always stuck in my mind. He said, all life on earth is sustained by the few millimeters of interaction between microorganisms in the soil and sunlight. And all of life is sustained by that. Well, let's take that on a spiritual level. All of the soul consciousness is sustained and upheld by that interaction between the descent of the guru and the individual little microorganism. That's what we are, the light of God and the little microorganism saying, yes, I want spiritual life. I want soul freedom. And so that we begin the journey through the grace of the great ones, through the grace of our master. I was talking yesterday to one of our wonderful young people, Neha, who lives here, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, I'm so grateful to live in a place like this. And I looked at her and I had tears in my eyes, and I said, me too. And I think we all feel that. But why? Why is that? Because we all could be living, as Jyotish said, all over the world, scattered, singing our little song to God. But there's the desire to share that consciousness with like-minded people. And that's why communities exist. That's why Master said that in the coming age, communities would be the social pattern of the new age. But then he went on to say that the Sevaka order is the heart of the community's movement. That's what we need to understand. That it isn't just, oh yeah, I took that training, I signed that course, my name's on the list, I took a vow. We need to understand the significance of it. Swami said that he believes in the future, and this always used to boggle my mind, but I'm beginning to, in my great wisdom, to think he was right. He used to say, in the future, historians will look and say that Ananda and the community's movement was the most important thing happening in the world in this time. Why? Because it's a new doorway for humanity to move forward. And if the Sevaka order is the heart of that, then we need to understand the value of it. We need to make it dynamic in our lives. And I wanted to just read very briefly from the very beginning of the guidelines. And I encourage you all to read this. Swami was so eloquent. And let me get to the page. Here we are. And this is just the very first article, membership defined. Who are we? What is Ananda? We have come together as a community of spirit. Our primary purpose is to find God by meditation and by service to God through our fellow man. Our lives are offered in openness as channels to the divine light, in order that by loving cooperation with God's grace, His light through us may expand its influence on earth. I'll read that last phrase again. By loving cooperation with God's grace, His light through us may expand its influence on earth. So that's really the point. As Jyotish was saying, Sevaka is based on the word service. But we need to understand that meditation is service. It's service to the Guru and to the Guru within us, God within us. And if we can see meditation as that, not just I'm doing this technique and I've checked off my hour today or however, but it's service, it's self-offering. And then everything we do, everything, if we can see it as service to God through our fellow man, everything. And then if we can go even beyond that, that the Sevaka order through like the aspen forest, that incredible root system, and another aspect of that root system that I always find fascinating, if a part of the aspen forest on miles away isn't getting enough moisture or enough nutrients in the soil, the root system funnels it so that they share. They funnel it. And that's what we're doing. We're funneling, if we're having a little struggle, but somebody else is doing well, we funnel that grace, we funnel that light to each other, not just here, but globally. Globally, when our Guru Bhais in India were struggling, we funneled resources to them in prayer. And it's been so, I can't tell you how much it's meant to them. Really overwhelming touching of their hearts. And so with the Sevaka order, we need to make it dynamic to our awareness, not just, oh yeah, I did that, and I get this newsletter. And part of the reason we asked Krishnadas to start focusing it, and I want you to know he's just volunteering this, and he's putting a lot of time into it. And I think it makes a statement too about what's behind the Sevaka order. And just to begin to see that all of what we're doing is trying to bring God's light through our connection in this way and to make it dynamic to our awareness. It's not about organization and structure and taking classes. It's about keeping your mind focused, that your whole life is about loving God, serving God, and sharing God's light with everyone. And so it helps us to define our lives. And if we can just, every day, just say, my life, no matter what, if it's smoky, if there's fires, if the power's out, if the roads are closed, and this week we've done it all. But to know that this is what it's about, to love God, to serve God, to be a channel of His light. And when Jyotish said, maybe we're only 500, not very many, of course, what number popped in my mind was 300. The 300 Spartan soldiers who held off the hundreds of thousands of Persian war soldiers that were invading the Greek peninsula. And they did it. And through their effort, they were killed to the man. But it rallied the rest of the Greek military forces so that they could bring in their ships, and through God's grace, through that sacrifice, they were able to prevail, and they turned back the Persian army. Just incredible. 300 or 500. Our odds are a little bit better. But it's the forces of darkness that are trying to invade, the forces of doubt and suspicion and anxiety and fear and separateness, and I'm different from you, and all of these things. And if we can just, my life is about serving God, loving God, knowing God, and I join with my fellow Sevaka members like a great network of light. And in that, try to make it dynamic, because it's in your mind every day, because that strengthens. That's why in these times when people don't know where to look, even if they never hear about Ananda. I mean, that battle of Thermopylae, that took place thousands of years ago. And we're still talking about it because of the courage and the nobility and the self-sacrifice. Well, here we are at the beginning of a time of transition into higher Dwapara Yuga, but not without its cost. The cost is what we're going through right now. And the Sevaka order can be a personal strengthening element, a community strengthening element, a worldwide strengthening element throughout Ananda. But we have to make it dynamic. We have to know, how can it be not just whose birthday it is, to put a fine point on it, that we want to make the Sevaka website something that really brings inspiration, really brings meaning. And it can, but it needs all of us to buy in, to say, this is important to me. Why? Because it defines my life, it defines the community, it defines the Ananda movement, and it brings God's light into the world. And that's the essence of it. It's so simple and so beautiful. You know, when we write our blogs, we often get the comment, oh, what you said was so simple. And to me, it didn't seem simple. It seemed pretty complex. And then I realized, I think you have a really simple mind. And you just see things simply. You don't see them in a complexity. And that's true. It's true of me. But I think it also helps to see things simply and to just to say, this is important. I love, we quoted the line from in a letter that Swamiji, during Inner Renewal Week, that Swami wrote about the Nayaswami order. He said, this will be seen, this Nayaswami order will be seen as a turning point for those viewing it from the perspective of those in the future. And that phrase, just from the perspective of those in the future. And that's what, Swami didn't live in the present. He lived in a timeless zone. And when he started the communities movement, it was in the future and for the future. And those of us who had the hands-on job, we were just laying the foundation. And so it is with the Sevaka order. From the perspective of those in the future, what this represents is the core of the spiritual core of the communities movement. Swamiji said without it, the communities movement would kind of slowly ratchet down till it was a nice social movement. And that's not what it is. These gurus did not come just for a nice social movement. They came with a mission, and we are part of that mission. And again, one of the lines from the Nayaswami vow is, I no longer view myself as a separate entity, but see myself as a part of a greater reality. And that's part of the essence of the Sevaka order. We have our individual search, but we're no longer just separate, walking the path. We have a purpose, and God brought us together for a purpose. And I think it's hard to see in the moment because, oh, we have to go to Master's Market, and oh, you don't have any avocados, and whatever. But there's a reason why we are connected, both in community and in the Sevaka order. It's a divine reason. And there's a reason that we're all seeking God together, because I think we are meant to find God together. I'll just close with a beautiful dream that one of our members had some years ago. And in the dream, and she told Swami this dream, and he said, that was a superconscious dream. She said, many Ananda people were gathered somewhere at the village. She didn't recognize the place, but she knew it was here on a hillside. And we were all standing in small circles, chanting. And she said Swami was there, but curiously, he had on a breastplate like the ancient Hebrew priest wore with different gems, like our Navratna representing the different planets. And he was sort of presiding. And so we were all standing there chanting, holding hands, and in small circles, 8 or 10 people. And then one by one person would raise their hands, and everyone knew that person was liberated. And there would be so much joy. It wasn't, well, why him and not me? But it was like we knew our turn would come. And one by one, it all happened. And Swami said that was a true vision. And that's what the Sevaka order is, one by one, through our service and meditation, self-offering, self-sacrificing, facing all of life's challenges together. Then one by one, we raise our hands and we know they made it, he made it, she made it. And one by one, we'll all come to that point. So we're very happy to spend this time together. It's for Jyotisha and me, more and more it's clear that our role, it isn't so much the details and the meetings and the decisions, but it's just really to try to keep the community uplifted and unified and inspired. And working with people like all of you, it makes it very easy. So thank you and God bless you. Now, Krishna Das wanted to talk about what's going to be happening next. And we also want to thank Krishna Das for helping to organize it. And one last thing, our wonderful friends who were preparing breakfast for us, the little croissants didn't get ready in time, but they're going to be back out as we exit as prasad. So you can get a croissant today.
I bet this is going really smooth for people online. And that's an inside joke, and they'll hear about it through at some point. So Jyotish and Devi, oh yeah, okay. They're always a tough act to follow. I made it through Jyotish, the previous speaker making your points. Devi, I think we're all one. But she says it better than I would anyway. I was thinking when Jyotish and Devi asked me to be this Sevaka order coordinator, and obviously I should know, a bit about the Sevaka order, its history and purpose, and of course, and I did to some extent, but not to be the coordinator. So that joke with Gandhi where the mother came to him with her child and said, tell my child to stop eating sugar. And he said, well, go and come back in a week. And then he did that. And then he just said, stop eating sugar. And she said, couldn't you have told him that last week? And he said, Madam, last week I myself did not quit eating sugar. So the reference there is that I needed to figure out a little bit more about the Sevaka order to represent it in any significant way, which I've been doing. I've gotten really inspired about it, truly. And I'm sure all of you are too when you tune in, and we tend to tune in annually at an event like this and get uplifted. And then, this is kind of a tough nut to crack because we are all living it. We have our daily sadhana. If you go through, first of all, there's the guidelines to the members of Sevaka order. Then there's the principles of membership. And the principles get it down to like a daily sadhana, daily attitudes, service, and so on. So, just reviewing all that, I've been getting very inspired. And we live it, but we're not always thinking it in that way to make it dynamic. One of the things Devi said was about the Guru Purnima, and today is celebrating Guru Purnima. But what I learned is that there's actually one per month, every time there's a full moon. India has such an evolved tradition that is so intricate in every area, music, if you study any of that, the philosophies, the scriptures. But today is Ashada Purnima, which happens in June and July. And this specific one is on prosperity and abundance. And I thought that's apropos for the Sevaka order today. We often think of prosperity and abundance in a material way, monetarily or whatever. But it's also about spirit, making it abundant, making the Sevaka order be all that it could be. When I first came to the village, and I met Swami, and I came and I saw what was here, and most of it was still in the ether, because it had all burned down a couple years before that. What physical there was, and but I felt the potential, and what was here was so dynamic, and the people particularly. And I just looked at him. I said, Swami, I'm so sorry that I've come now. I wish I could have come earlier and been a part of building this. And he looked at me like, a little puzzled. He goes, it's just beginning, And I think he'd say that at any point along the way, that it's just beginning, because he has set up so many systems for us, and so beautifully and so articulated so perfectly with clarity. the purpose of our life as devotees, as disciples of a master that came as part of a movement, starting a movement. So I wanted to back up a little bit with the history. I don't know if I had a chance to do this, but so Catherine, wrote her book, Two Souls, Two Lives, with two lives, two souls. Thank you. Two lives, two souls, four lives. Two souls, four lives. What I'm leading up to is she could write a sequel, Two Souls, Six Lives. Because there was William the Conqueror and then Henry I, and William the Conqueror started all these systems, but it was Henry I that materialized it or manifested or actualized it, you might say, and then generations beyond that, maybe not right then when he was doing it, because it always takes generations to actually, get the point and carry on. But then with Mantradevi and I, with our pilgrimages to Spain, learning much more about San Fernando III, who Master was, and Alfonso X, the same scenario happened. San Fernando III took back the Iberian Peninsula, which is now Spain, and from the Moors, they had it for 800 years, and San Fernando pushed the Moors all the way back down to the very south, and then after they were expelled entirely. But then Alfonso X took over as his son, and he actualized and materialized everything. And there's not time here to get into all of the things he created and that he put in place, that we are still, he's one of the 23rd lawgivers. His relief is in Washington, D.C. And so Mantradevi knows these details better than I, but there are so many things that he put in place. One being, a knight at that time was sort of not just, it was a kshatriya and a warrior, but they were dharmic. And there was lots of codes that if you were a good knight, obviously if San Fernando III was an avatar and Alfonso X was a saint, and giving the rules and the guidelines and how to behave. And he wrote extensively on how a knight should sit, how he should walk, how he should eat, how he should, the comportment, how he should, and then all of the battles and how the code of conduct and so on. And it was vast. And again, in that time, that generation, how many people just jumped right on board and said, this is great? Few knights, maybe, I don't know how many, and then those that were in tune with that. So here we are again with Master coming with this ray, this movement to the West of yoga meditation. He interprets all of the scriptures and gives us the spirit of the tradition of India without getting bogged down in all of the dogma. He gives us the spirit of it, and we're all living by that. But then he introduced also the seed thought for spiritual community, world brotherhood, villages, communities. But what did one manifest in his time? No, Swami Kriyananda comes along, not his son in this lifetime, but his spiritual son. He comes along and he takes up the charge and he puts it all down in books, and endless books. But some of those books, like and then he starts the order, the Sevaka order and the Nayaswami order. So that created the framework for us in a very specific way to understand, like, what are we doing? What is it that we're doing? I mean, we could live this nice life together in community and take advantage of all of its benefits that we are doing. But is it going to sustain itself? Is it going to roll out for future generations? I think it has a better chance of doing that when we collectively really do tune in. Now, the creative part is how we could make it more dynamic, tangibly, but spiritually, I mean, we have it going. We just want to amp up that circuitry. Like there's lots of images we could use, and I'm thinking of, we're all points of light out there shining in the dark. Well, it's better if we're a constellation, so that we're forming constellations. Seattle's a constellation, Palo Alto's a constellation, and the others, communities. And then and then the big constellation. When you look up at the sky, and they're actually all rotating in unison because they are all connected magnetically. And that's what the village, I mean, it does represent the core, and it started here, but all of these communities are manifesting this spirit, and we want to start connecting in a more dynamic way, just our lives together in the Sevaka order. Now, Swami called the guidelines to the Sevaka order at one point the rule. Well, okay, the rule sounds a little heavy, and it's a rule, just like we say we only have a few here, no dogs, no drugs, no alcohol, and we have a lot of guidelines. And what's the difference between a rule and a guideline is that it's a suggestion, really, but suggestions kind of weak. Well, maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't. But they are just suggestions, these guidelines, on what? How to live a happier, more fulfilled life in actually doing what we have all signed on to do, whether or not we're consciously dynamically conscious of it, like on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, like Davey said. We go into the market and are there avocados or not? So we want to, and again, I have to quote Dharmadas here. We were talking about this with the other community leaders as well, and he said we were going to call it a reset. And he goes, well, a reset sounds like it's broken. It's more like, why don't we call it a upgrade? And if you heard his talk at Spiritual New Week, he weaves in the computer analogies very well. But he said, why don't we call it an upgrade? And I think that's what we want. We want to upgrade, or we're saying energize and enliven to give it more life. This Sevaka order for each and every one of us. And if it is in every one of our lives, it will naturally be, as the whole will be greater than the sum of its parts. I read this beautiful line in the autobiography where Sri Teshwar was talking to Master, and he said, Satsang's boat is calling. Who'll go? Who'll go? If no one will go, at least I will go. And Satsang's boat is calling, and we've heard it, and we've jumped in, and we heard it, and we're going. But I was comparing that to Swami's. He wrote, "Many hands make a miracle." He gave us all of these beautiful teachings and systems, the orders, and so on. But then he wrote all this music to give us something to march to. Many hands make a miracle, brave were the people, but then how about go on alone? We have to have that spirit in each and every one of us. We're going to make it no matter who does, no matter what's going on around us. We have our eye on the goal, the pole star, and we're going there. So that's Satsang Buddha's calling. Who will go? Who will go? I will go. There's one there. So that's the spirit of, it's interesting, the spirit of community. Each and every one of us a shining bright light. But it has much more power if we come together. Swami knew that, so he gave it a framework, the Sevaka order. And I think if you haven't recently, read the guidelines. It's on the Ananda Library. And then recently, Ken just put the principle of membership of the Sevaka order on the Ananda Library as well. And I have supplied the link several times. And I think it's good to read that over. And again, many of them, I'm doing that. But it's just more for awareness, to sort of pick up the energy for all of us. Okay, getting to some nuts and bolts things, which is the tough nut to crack. How can we make it more tangible? So some ideas came up. It's not like the big fix and, this is really going to be hot and it's just going to explode. It's just more awareness and getting some things going. One, I was thinking of making the Sevaka order website or my emails, and I know everybody gets lots of emails from various departments of the village, and but it would be like a news center. And if there's any news that I pick up that would be interesting to all, then you could feed it to me, or I'll seek some out, or I'll just keep my ear out and kind of listening for things that I think, that'd be nice for everything to know. And I would give you an example, but it's going to be in my first news piece, so I'm not going to give it away. But that's one, like a little news center that connects us all, and it's more of a personal nature. The second one, because I asked around to some of my closer friends, and I said, give me some ideas. And another idea came up with creating a segment on the website, how God protects his devotees. So we would say how Master protects his devotees. Now, I'm sure there's been miracles in your life. You don't have a platform to share it. You've told some friends. Maybe it makes it into one of the news feeds because you happen to mention to the right person, or they felt inspired to, it fit with what they were going to write about right then. I don't know. But I'm sure all of you have had something in your life you could call a miracle. And it doesn't have to be a miracle. It could be a way that you know beyond a doubt that Master guided you to do that, or that you had a strong intuition and you felt that it was Master or Swamiji, or something of even a hunch. And it would be nice to share, because I think it would be good for us it would be inspiring for all of us, how all of these miracles are happening. Asha did write her book, and that was inspiring. There's always miracles that are happening, and some may not have made it into her book. So it's fine to go back in time. Everything applies. Now, that's probably not enough either. Jyotish said we need a service project that we can all get behind. Now, maybe each community, because I hope they're listening, each community may come up with some good idea that could be shared with other communities, and that we either replicate it exactly or we do something similar. And I know that we take well people and make them better, and and that's our main focus. We are so good at outreach. That's what we do. We're always into outreach. We're always rippling out further and further. But I'm always thinking, okay, we're getting new people, and the people gather into the center, and we need something dynamic for everybody to do. And that this Sevaka order could be an avenue for that. So that's where we need some help. Maybe coming up with something. And I don't know about if it's locally. I don't think it hurts locally if we are covering our bases with making our orders strong, keeping our sadhana strong, keeping our ripples going out for outreach always, and then in our what would be our main service areas, but maybe to actually feed. There's a catastrophe locally, and we get involved and maybe do a soup kitchen. I don't know. I think it would be fascinating, like what they're doing in Rishikesh. Why couldn't we do some of that here? There's certainly a need. These fires happening everywhere, and I know sometimes it gets a little like, well, I only have so much money, so it's easy to write a check because we're not in paradise where the fire hit last year. But somehow there could be ideas. So in the breakout rooms, we're going to come together after this break. And so we're asking you to go home, get online, and join these breakout rooms, and then share in groups of 4 and 5, maybe some ideas, both ways that you are living these principles of membership and making it, dynamic, creative, and also maybe some ideas of how we could energize our connection as Sevakas and in the Sevaka Seva area of service. Okay, and thank you for your ear. Could we end with a song? Unless you. A closing prayer. Okay, because we didn't start with one, and I thought maybe we could. We have 2 minutes.
Okay, we're kind of driven by our being online, which is a blessing and a curse. But I do want to add that being online has changed the possibility of coordination in this last year. Devi and I are much, much more connected on a daily, weekly basis with India and Italy than we were 2 years ago, for instance. And if we can multiply that factor in the Sevaka order, find ways that we can connect much more often, I think that that will help build this identity. But many ideas like that need to come out of these breakout groups, virtual choirs singing together, all kinds of ideas like that. So for this session, let's end with a prayer. We want you then to, if you're here, then to go home and join online. And if you're online, there'll be a little bit of a break, and then we'll have the breakout sessions, and you'll be able you'll all receive an email, and you can just click on that link, and that will lead you to the online session. So let's end with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Bless us and inspire us. Help us intuit new ideas to strengthen our connections in the Sevaka order, to make it an effective vehicle for service to Thee, and to coordinate and to unite our energies into one great flow of Thy light and Thy grace. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, thank you for coming, and God bless you.